Arthur C. Clarke once said, "Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic." And indeed, if you think about it, what to us looks like normal life, to our parents or even grandparents, the way we shop, the way we travel, the way we meet people, the way we marry or divorce, have children, get better or get sick, everything is really starting to look like science fiction. In that sense, technology is pushing our boundaries from the smallest minuscule nano dimensions all the way to exploring the vastness of the space. And the interesting shift that happens is once you remove the scientist hats and go into the entrepreneur hat, is that you start moving away from creating only magic in terms of advancing the features of the solution. You have to start moving towards thinking about the market and creating value for that market. In that sense, moving from a scientist to an entrepreneur, it's important to cross that chasm, the proverbial chasm of really getting to your market, understanding what they want. What does that mean? Typically, when you think about opportunities, they arise in one or two ways. One is to go out there and spot a need, spot a pain in the market, see that people are unsatisfied in doing something, they're having a hard time doing something, and then tailor a solution accordingly. One example that maybe comes to mind is car sharing, right? People started understanding that urban dwellers like you and me living downtown have a lot of costs associated with owning a car, maybe are not ecologically satisfied with owning a car, and indeed don't need that car on a daily basis. Maybe public transportation is good enough. At the same time, every now and then, owning a car can be very helpful, yet the rent-a-cars were not as easily accessible and quite expensive, offering no flexibility in terms of their usage. Taxis are very expensive and lack the autonomy of actually sitting behind the wheel. And this is where entrepreneurs understood the market niche and the gap in the market, the inefficiency that the current solutions created, and tailored the solution accordingly. Does that mean that there was no technology involved? No, of course. Some of the technology was tailored towards meeting that solution, but ultimately it was the technology that followed a problem in the market. Now, what we're going to talk about today is quite the opposite. It means having a technology in hand and finding a way to make it into the market. One example could be e-ink, electronic ink. Deep in the MIT labs, scientists were working on a minuscule bubble. That bubble was containing millions of little microcapsules, black, which were positively charged, and white, which were negatively charged, and the technology was really this electronic ink. You may know electronic ink from e-readers, like maybe Kindle, for example, yet it took so many steps, hundreds of millions of dollars, many investors and partners involved from the technology meeting the market need. And indeed, it turns out that Kindle or e-readers were only one of the myriads of possible implications and applications that such a technology could meet. Everything from big signage and industrial applications all the way to luxury little watches. An entrepreneur had to decide at some point, which opportunities does this technology meet and how do I choose and prioritize among them? This is going to be the focus of the video today. Okay, so we mentioned the challenge of going from a technology into the actual market and the many steps involved in going there. What we'll focus on today, because a 5-minute video cannot do it justice, is just on the front end, on the first steps of opportunity identification and a bit of evaluation if you want. So the 4 fundamental steps we'll go through is first, identify the features of your technology, and I'll tell you why that's important. Second, identify broad problem areas and broad application areas where these features might solve some problems, okay? Step number 3, as a team, get together and do your opportunity matrix and understand and prioritize which of these problems to attack first. And as the 4th step, understand the customer ecosystem around it, because it might be that you're missing out an important influencer or a user in this system that you haven't thought of immediately that could be crucial in bringing your technology to the market. So, knowing the 4 steps, we'll use an example of a technology called hypersonic sound to get a bit of life into these 4 steps. Hypersonic sound, in essence, did for sound what laser did for light. In other words, it allowed people to control the direction of the sound and how far it can go, okay? So going back to our first step, identifying the features of the technology, why is that important? It's important because oftentimes it turns out that you as a scientist are working on only one precise feature and advancing that feature, and you might be taking all the other features of that technology for granted, and other people might understand, boy, it's really in the combination of these features where the real value for the market lies. So some of the features you can see on the slide. When it comes to the hypersonic sound, it's about how loud it can be, it's about how far the sound can travel, it's about the bleed or the precision of the sound, it's about whether you can use it indoors or outdoors. Listing all of these features and identifying the features of the technology, first important step. Knowing the technology features, we'll move into the second step. What are some of the big problem areas where you could actually apply some of these features? Thinking about this hypersonic sound technology, oftentimes the situations and problem areas that students will identify when working together are all the possible situations of noise pollution that you can imagine. For example, one of the big areas they'll often identify is the noise pollution of personal entertainment, where couples or families fight about which program to watch, which channel to watch, especially when traveling along together. They say the kids and their channel is really irritating to the parents and vice versa. Another example they might come up is, for example, in the theater. So not noise pollution situations, but solutions where silence is really important and only a precise person needs to hear a specific information and nobody else. A theater whisperer might use this kind of a technology. Other situations like that could be museums. For example, they'll say often that carrying those audio guides can be really painful. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just walk in front of the exhibit and hear tailored information for that exhibit? Opportunities are boundless. I'm sure you could come up with 7 or 8 more applications as we speak. But listing all of them is important because otherwise you might be ending up with a suboptimal opportunity that doesn't lead you to the best possible market space to discover. Indeed, our own research here at Entrepreneurship Research Institute at Technical University of Munich is showing that the diversity of experiences in the team is critical for such brainstorming. Because think about 3D printing technology. An architect would have a very different idea what to do with such a technology than a dentist, a doctor, or anybody else. Important to bring diversity of experiences to the table. Moving into the third step, how do we evaluate among all of these possible opportunities? What we find helpful as one possible tool, and a very simplistic for this first step before you go into deep feasibility analysis, is to look at what we call an opportunity matrix. Such an opportunity matrix might have 2 dimensions, might have many more, but the 2 that we find critical are one that relates to the team, and the second one that relates to the nature and scope of the problem. Think about all of these opportunities. Which one of them are really addressing a deep, meaningful problem where there's a lot of pain and a lot of people, a big market that would be willing to have that problem solved for them? On the other dimension, think about your team. What passions do you have? Which problems do you really care about? Which skills do you have in the team that might be a good match for fixing that problem? This will give you a nice space where you can align the opportunities that we mentioned, and you might say, well, museums are not such a big passion of mine, but you know what? The area of personal entertainment, this is the one where we want to go for. It will ultimately depend on your team, which one you decide for, of course. And this is the beauty of entrepreneurship, finding the right opportunity for you.
And then we have to build a much more holistic and a larger product spectrum to really tackle this market. And that was kind of as well pretty much coming from the technology background that we had. If you have a topic that's a real technology push, where you are building everything from the fact that you have got a cool technology, then of course you have to really make sure that you can roll that out in a consistent way so that all the kind of pieces of your technology can work together.
Our fourth and final step is then about finding the customer ecosystem around it. So if we think about the personal entertainment space, you could think about being only a technology provider where your customer is really going to be maybe a company like Bose or any other audio manufacturer out there. Yet you might think, I want to integrate even further and talk directly to car manufacturers. Even more so, you might think about the actual end user and think about going through retailers to get there. Bottom line is that every technology and every product has a deep value chain, and it's really important to understand your customer, get out of the building, see what their pains and problems are, because oftentimes you'll be surprised and find a new opportunity just from those conversations. It's not always comfortable, but it's really important and energizing, so I wish you a great time doing that all together. What can we take away from this journey? I think number one, you understood that technology push can be a very challenging yet very exciting journey ahead of you. Yeah? It's important to be prepared for that journey and equip yourself with a good diverse team. It's important, second, to understand when is it time for divergent, open brainstorm thinking and when is it time to zoom in and focus and prioritize. Indeed, prioritizing is key, and if you look at the example of e-ink and what happened to them, you'll realize that being distracted was one key problem that the team had in bringing the solution to the market. Finally, beyond prioritizing and having a good team, it is important to know your customer. Never underestimate that step and always understand. A customer doesn't wake up in the morning to buy a better solution, to buy a better drill. A customer wakes up in the morning thinking of jobs they need to get accomplished. They want to be quicker, do things easier, be more efficient, and do it at a lower cost. So think about the jobs the customer needs to get done, and I think you're on a good way to get your technology into the market. I wish you the best of luck.